Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Before I jump into a drasha for this week, I had a few people write over the course of the last 2 weeks and ask if we were going to begin live services again on Friday evenings. So just let me know if you'd actually be interested in that happening again. Obviously, this sermon would then be a part of that. We're thinking once a month, but after Shabbos, let me know in the comments down below. If enough people comment, then we'll go ahead and start that up again, maybe the last Shabbos of each month, maybe starting after Passover at the end of April. All right, so question for everyone. What has more impact on your life? That which happened yesterday or that which happened 5 years ago? Hopefully we understand that the answer is that depends, but generally speaking, if we have the illusion that we live some sort of purely linear life, that can easily be discounted as real because the new job that we started 5 years ago has significantly more impact on what's happening right this second than what I had for breakfast yesterday, of course, unless the evil wizard from the kingdom over tried to poison me yesterday, in which case maybe yesterday's meal does have more and I need to stop reading fantasy novels during the week. But that's just it. There is a little bit of an illusion and a little bit of an unconscious desire for our lives to be linear, that as we get older and as we become more experienced, then the things that we do as more experienced people has a greater impact on our lives. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily the case. And the reason I'm thinking of that this week is, I keep on saying one of my favorite passages. I guess all right, let's deal with this reality first. Anything that I'm studying at any given time becomes my favorite passage in that moment, and that's part of why I love teaching Torah, and I would encourage us all to enter Torah with the curiosity of how can I make this passage my favorite passage. But specifically, we are in Parashat Tzav, which is our second Parashat in Vayikra, in Leviticus, which again, as I said last week, is one of the eye-roll parts of Torah because we have a really hard time calibrating ourselves to a sacrificial cult to which we no longer belong. That being said, I just love this passage in chapter 8 of Leviticus because we have the entire process of the priesthood stepping out and doing their thing in all of their official capacity, wearing all of their official clothes. And so on the moment of ordaining them to do their work, we've got certain things that they're dressed in and then certain sacrifices that are made. And the reason I absolutely love this is, all right, I know I need to jump a little bit into some textual criticism, but the book of Leviticus is the last of the books that was written in Torah. It was the last that was put together. It was put together for the most part in the Second Temple times, meaning there was a very mature Levitical priestly set of rituals that was in force at that time, and Leviticus is reflecting that. How do I know? Well, I'm not making this up. This is scholarly consensus, but even more, let's just take a look for a second at all that's going on here. So we've got a robe and we've got a sash and we've got an ephod, so a linen kind of clothing that shows the office of making a sacrifice. We've got a breastplate with Urim and Thummim in it. We've got a very specific belt. We've got a turban that's very complex. We've got the hems of the robes that has bells on it that are shaped like pomegranates. And this is all pretty striking and crazy, except for this is what a priest would have looked like in the Second Temple. Imagine we are in Sinai for 40 years walking around, and around us are the Amalekites and the Jebusites and the Hittites and the Perizzites that are trying to attack us, and we've got our priests walking around all night long in the encampment with bells going on. Okay, this is a much later sort of thing that makes sense in a city, in a temple complex, not something as we are essentially living an extended Bedouin existence. And moreover, all the metal and the fine materials and the expensive cloth and the argamon, so the purple that came from Tyre and Sidon, all these sorts of things. So we left Egypt with bread that we didn't have time to let rise and grabbed whatever we could stick on our backs and in our carts. And we remembered our dolphin skins and our gold and silver and copper and all of our acacia wood. All right, I think that you get the point. Torah is a reflection, just like we are, of a long history. And sometimes things that happen in the distant past are placed in the present. And sometimes things that are happening in the present are placed in the distant past. And it all gets mixed together. Why? Because that's how we experience reality. Not as a linear day 1 through day 20,000, and each one is kept in a nice order. Something that happened 20 years ago can have a more profound effect on us than something that happened yesterday. What's really, really cool about this Torah portion and the fact that it's pulling different elements of clothing and ritual elements from 1,000 years of history, going all the way back to pre-temple times, is the fact that each one of these articles of clothing can be turned into or seen as a metaphor that actually does help us understand who we are today. So to close out the sermon, to close out this drasha, I want to take just one, or actually two, of those elements that are in this description of the priestly wardrobe and show how we don't live linear life, but how by becoming more aware of this reality, we can maybe live a more effective life. So the image I want to focus on is the image of the Choshen and the Urim and Thummim. So the Choshen is the breastplate. Urim and Thummim, we actually don't know what they are specifically. It's easiest for me to think of them as dice, so they are objects of claromancy. This makes very little sense to us today because normative Judaism doesn't usually involve something like, all right, I want to know what God's trying to say to me, so I'm going to take some dice and throw them on the table, and if it's double sixes, I won't do that. If it's double ones, I will do that, and anything in... All right, that's kind of what the Urim and Thummim are. And I could spend a lot of time going more into them because I think they're fascinating, but I'm going to actually do a video this week on them. I'm going to take 1 week break in the Part A series because I've been wanting to deal with the Urim and Thummim for some time. So just be watching out for later on in the week. But the basic idea is there were multiple ways that the people, the Hebrew people, the Jewish people would try to figure out what God's will was. One was through prophets, another was through dreams, and another was through Urim and Thummim. And would essentially work like that. Okay, we need to decide where we are going to build a new structure. So what are we going to do? We're going to ask God. We're going to ask the Eternal. How do we do that? With the Urim and Thummim. So if the Urim and Thummim come back with a certain answer, then we'll do it this way versus that way. Again, not normative Judaism of today, but neither is temple sacrifice. Okay, things worked a little bit differently. We look into the past to see different truths that we can pull forward until today. But look at the symbolism here. The Choshen is the breastplate. Urim and Thummim go into a secret place in the breastplate. And if you've ever gone to a synagogue, you've seen this, maybe realizing or maybe not realizing what you were seeing, but the way that we decorate a Torah scroll is meant to be a reflection of this passage right now in Torah. And so the breastplate that is put on many Torah scrolls is the Choshen. It is the breastplate of the priest. And oftentimes we see them, as is mentioned in Torah, decorated with 12 different gemstones, each representing the 12 different tribes. Sometimes they're decorated with wording. Sometimes they're decorated with various different Hebrew ideas or passages. But very common to see the 12 different tribes. But you'll often then see a little box at the bottom. Sometimes there's even a little slidey plate there. And then it's empty inside. And what the heck is that? Well, that's a memory of where these dice or something, these lots, were placed inside for this act of communicating with the Eternal. And the metaphor is beautiful because what function does a breastplate serve? It's protection, specifically protection of where we are most vulnerable. At the most metaphor, literal level, protection of our heart. And from within that which protects our heart, we hide away that which allows us to make decisions. So why do we protect our heart? Well, because we get hurt, because we experience trauma, because we're betrayed by people, because people gaslight us and then say that they've never gaslit anyone. You know, that sort of stuff. So we go through all of these traumas throughout our life, and then we make decisions through the protection that we gain because of that. Now, I would like to think that the people that wrote the Torah and edited the Torah over 1,000+ years were fully aware when we got to the priestly garments of the Second Temple times that those probably weren't worn by kind of a Bedouin fleeing sort of people in exile wandering for 40 years, but that it was kept in not only to reflect what they knew of that moment, but to help us understand us. We don't sleep with our breastplate, right? We put it on every morning. This is something that every day when we step out into the world, we put on our protection from the world. But what's on that breastplate is our choice, our creative use of what's in our past. And if we are surrounded by people and our own decision-making that says that we protect ourselves by existing completely, utterly, daily, in every single moment within the worst things that have happened to us, then our decision-making, that place from which we decide what we're going to do or not do, is going to come from within our most unhealed traumas. If, on the other hand, every day we wake up and gird ourselves with the memory of how we overcame each of those things, then all of our decisions come from a place of how we already overcame something. If you're watching this and you're an adult, you've overcome stuff. We can feel like we are nothing but the sum of our traumas, but if we are here today, interacting with each other, listening to this sermon, we have overcome something, and we can define ourselves by that, or we can define ourselves by only the hurt that's behind it. And how different do our decisions look depending on which of these breastplates we've built, depending on what's written on this breastplate. If I'm, for instance, in the process of dating, and on my breastplate is every pain I've ever experienced from another human being, then the person that I meet doesn't get to be their own human being. Yes, I can learn lessons, I can develop wisdom over time, but if this person does something and I'm only seeing the worst things that previous partners or friends have done to me, then I'm not treating that person as an individual. I'm treating them as the repository of my past trauma. I put on a breastplate of trauma, and I am rolling the Urim and Thummim. I'm making decisions based on what's happened before, not on who this person is. If, on the other hand, I recognize that if I am alive, then I've overcome something, then when I talk to this new human being, I know that humans are humans. I know that we as humans, including me, including you, we all do stupid things to hurt other people. So I step into a relationship understanding that it's a human being who's going to hurt me. That's part of learning from the past. But they're not the person who caused me the greatest hurt. They have an opportunity to be their own thing. I can protect myself in wisdom, but I can protect myself while allowing someone to fully be the human being that they are. This goes for jobs, new initiatives, new ideas, new ways to move forward in my life. If I choose to only look at my failures, and I've got lots of failures to look at. And again, if we are alive adults, then we have plenty of failures to look back. If every decision, when I pull out the Urim and Thummim and ask the Eternal, what should I do? And that Eternal is a reflection of every bad thing that's happened from every decision, then the answer is going to be, don't do anything new, don't evolve, don't move forward, because it's just going to be crap. It is going to be another time that you're hurt, and you only have experience of getting hurt in the past, so therefore, that's what's written on the breastplate. But if it is, yes, I've had good experiences and bad experiences, but look at the things I've learned from every time I've tried to step forward in my life, then that breastplate is every experience I've had that's made me stronger. All this requires the acknowledgement that what happened 5, 10, 15, 20, 50 years ago might have as much, if not more, influence on me than something that's happening right now. I'm deciding about a new job, I'm dating someone new, I'm undertaking a new volunteer activity. How we step into that is not based on the moment, it's based on every other experience we've had that's related to that. From within that, the more conscious we are of how we pull the past into the present, how radically different our present becomes. Thank you for being a part of Beit Virtuali. We'll see you next time. Shabbat Shalom.
אוהב את עמו ישראל